Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
What's up, everybody, and welcome into the Legal Hands to the Face show with Bill Colarulo on this emotional Monday night in the city of Philadelphia. We knew this was coming. I've been talking about it for weeks that I did not think Jason Kelce was coming back. I fully expected him to retire. And if you follow me, you know I also was saying that I was okay with him retiring, that I was ready to get younger and move on from Jason. But after watching that press conference and watching Jason Kelce's emotional 45-minute speech announcing his retirement, even though I was expecting it, even though I said I wanted it, that was emotional. I was sitting here in my house watching the press conference on TV by myself, and I'm not a crier. I'm not an emotional guy like Kelce is, so you knew he was going to cry. But I found myself holding back tears multiple times throughout that speech. But this is the Legal Hands to the Face show. We're going to get into it. I appreciate everybody who's here. We're streaming live across the JAKIB Sports Network. We are also streaming live across all my social media platforms, Bill Colarulo, Philly Sports Talk. We're going to be joined later on in the show by our Eagles insider, John McMullen, who was in the house at the NovaCare complex where there wasn't a dry eye in the room. So I want to talk to John McMullen about his takeaways from that press conference. And as hard as it is, we have to look forward and figure out, now that we know Jason Kelce will not be here, what is the plan at offensive line with this football team? What's the plan with the leadership of this football team? So we'll get into all of that. Make sure you're liking and subscribing everywhere. We're also going to take the audio from this and upload it to the podcast platform. So if you're listening to the podcast, we appreciate you as well. Make sure you leave me a review on any podcast platform you're listening. It really helps us reach more Eagles fans. But let's take a look at some of the takeaways of Jason Kelce's emotional retirement announcement. Whew, man. I told you I was expecting this, but it doesn't make it any easier. One of the greatest Philadelphia Eagles in franchise history, Jason Kelce. And I think it was Mark Farcetta who said it earlier, that only in Philadelphia would an offensive lineman become an absolute superstar. But Jason Kelce, a 6th-round draft pick back in 2011, thanks to Andy Reid. I know there are some people in this town who will never forgive Andy Reid for not winning a Super Bowl here. But he did a lot of great things for this organization, and maybe none bigger than drafting an undersized center in the 6th round out of Cincinnati named Jason Kelce. And you heard Kelce today talk about how he didn't have a great year in 2016, was almost traded. And it was Jeff Stoutland University, a coach we keep hearing amazing things about was the one who believed in Kelce, got him to focus on some technique, some different things. And after 2016, Jason Kelce was a first-team All-Pro 6 out of 7 seasons. 2017, 2018, 2019. The only year he wasn't a first-team All-Pro was the 2020 disastrous season. First-team All-Pro again in 21, 22, and this past season. First-team All-Pro. Should be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Shouldn't even be a question. Jason Kelce should be a first-ballot Hall of Famer, and I can't wait to hear his speech in Canton, Ohio. Because not only was this retirement speech great, he also gave the greatest speech in Philadelphia sports history down on the steps of the Art Museum, the Rocky Steps, after they won Super Bowl 52. And in perfect Jason Kelce fashion, he shows up to the retirement press conference today, not in a suit, not in a collared shirt, with cut-off sleeves and an Eagles t-shirt, rocking an expensive Rolex in cut-off sleeves. Absolutely loved it. Perfect Jason Kelce. And it was an emotional one, and he tried to get through it. And here were some of my takeaways from the retirement speech that I loved. First of all, never did I expect Jason Kelce to throw out a White Men Can't Jump movie reference, one of my favorite movies as a kid. And I'm not even sure everybody got the reference, but he said on the lacrosse field, he was LeBron James, and on the football field, he was Billy Hoyle. Billy Hoyle was Woody Harrelson's character from White Men Can't Jump. Never thought I needed that reference, but I absolutely loved it. Kelce talked about when he was drafted. He talked about his dad running in after Andy Reid made the phone call. And he got into some things I wasn't expecting. He talked about that horrible day that Garrett Reed overdosed and passed away at training camp. A day he said he'll never forget. Seeing David Culley, who I think was the wide receiver coach at the time, look like he literally saw a ghost. He talked about the snow game, where before the game, no one even knew it was going to snow, and then an all-out blizzard comes, and LaShawn McCoy goes absolutely nuts in that game. He obviously talked about Super Bowl 52. And Nick Foles, with the biggest D on the team, and Doug Peterson with the biggest balls in the stadium. Man, there were so many times I was getting goosebumps. I'm giving myself chills right now just remembering some of the things he said. He obviously talked about Jeff Stoutland. He talked about the 4 head coaches he had. Andy Reid, even Chip Kelly, Dougie P., Nick Sirianni. He made a reference to the infamous flower speech that Nick Sirianni gave. Talked about how the roots are still there. And maybe one of the best things the entire retirement speech, when he talked about his brother, when he talked about his mom, his dad, and his wife. Just really moving, genuine stuff from a genuine guy. Did we expect anything less from Jason Kelce? And then he made sure to talk about the Philadelphia fans. And I've said this before. I've said it here on this show. I said it on 97.5 The Fanatic this past weekend when we were talking about Darius Slay's comments about the Philly fans, that yes, these Philly fans are tough. But if you give it your all, you will be beloved forever. And Jason Kelce made sure to make that point on his way out that, yes, the Philadelphia Eagles fans, they'll let you know when you're not performing well every single time, but they will also love you if you show effort, aggression, desire, and the will to fight. They will love you in this city if you love it. Because the athletes like Jason Kelce, who get this town and understand that this is the best damn city in the world to play professional sports, especially as a Philadelphia Eagle, the players like Kelce who get it and understand it will be legends in this town forever. And even though I was ready for this, even though I said I was okay with him retiring and I expected him to retire, this one stings. This one definitely stings. The Philadelphia Eagles lost one of their great leaders today. And even on his way out, he made sure to send some messages to the players currently on the team about what to do if you don't like these Philadelphia fans. Give it your all. Love the city back. And you'll be fine. And he even gave that story, which surprised me, about Zach Ertz. We all remember when Zach Ertz shied away from that block. And fans weren't happy. Because if you don't give it your all in this town, we're going to let you hear it. But Zach Ertz, to his credit, and you heard Kelce talk about it today, came back the next week, and you never saw Zach Ertz again not give it his all on the football field. And because of it, he's loved in this town. Zach Ertz will always be remembered, not for what he did when he shied away from that block, but what he did every single game and every single play after, which led all the way up to the game-winning touchdown in Super Bowl 52. An incredible career for Jason Kelce, an incredible championship speech for Jason Kelce, and an unbelievable retirement speech where he hit on absolutely everything. But we have to look forward now. As Philadelphia Eagles fans, as a Philadelphia Eagles organization, free agency is about a week away. This time next week, it's going to start getting leaked because the legal tampering period starts at 12 o'clock, Monday, March 11th. So it's time for us to look forward. And what happens now along that offensive line? Big shoes to fill. And I think the best advice that the coaching staff can give to Cam Jurgens is that he's not going to fill Jason Kelce's shoes. Nobody ever will. We may never see another Jason Kelce in the NFL again, let alone the city of Philadelphia, both on the field and off of it, both for his play and his leadership. So the best thing that Cam Jurgens can do is not try to replace Jason Kelce. Just be the best version of Cam Jurgens that you can be. And I do have high hopes for Jurgens. I know he had an up and down season this past year playing right guard, but that's him playing out of position. He's not a guard. He was drafted to be a center. He was drafted to take over when Jason Kelce retired, which a lot of us thought was going to be a little bit sooner than today. Didn't make it any easier, but we did think it was going to be sooner than today. So I'm excited to see what Cam Jurgens can do at center. It's not going to be Jason Kelce. There's going to be a drop-off in play. But the good news is, if we're looking for some positives here, I know it's not easy, but if you're looking at some positives here, you are going to save a lot of cap space with Kelce retiring. And we'll get all the final numbers because I'm sure things will maybe be restructured with him going on the retired list and all that. But Kelce had an over $10 million cap hit last year. Cam Jurgens this coming season only has a $1.8 million cap hit. So the Eagles should pick up some more cap space to fill some of these needs, more so on the defensive side of the football. Because you heard Jason Kelce talk about Jeff Stoutland today, and we know how good Stoutland is. And if I'm Howie Roseman and Kellen Moore and Nick Sirianni, I'm going to Jeff Stoutland and I'm asking him, if we move Jurgens over to center, is Tyler Steen ready to take over the starting job at right guard? Because just like you drafted Cam Jurgens to be your starting center, you drafted Tyler Steen in last year's draft in the 3rd round to eventually take over at right guard. And if Jeff Stoutland says he's ready, then that's all I have to hear if I'm Nick Sirianni, Kellen Moore, and Howie Roseman. And my starting line next year is going to be Jordan Mailata at left tackle, who I'm expecting an even better season from. We've seen him pretty much get better every single year. He's still extremely young. You have Landon Dickerson at left guard, who's entering the final year of his rookie contract, who's eligible for a new deal. I expect him to get one. You have Cam Jurgens at center, which the very small sample size that we saw of Cam Jurgens at center, if you remember back 2 preseasons ago, was really promising. In Cam Jurgens' rookie season, Kelce, I don't think, played center in preseason that year. I think he may have been hurt, recovering from ankle surgery or something. And Jurgens was promising playing with the first team at center. So I'm excited to see what he can do playing his natural position. And then at right guard, you roll with Tyler Steen if Stoutland says he's ready, and you still have another future Hall of Famer at right tackle in Lane Johnson. So I know it's hard, and trust me, I'm not trying to downplay anything about Jason Kelce. I'm just as emotional as all of you are. But I think if you take a look at this offensive line, it's going to be okay. And when John McMullen joins the show a little bit later on, we'll talk to him about what he thinks the plan's going to be along that offensive line. But that may answer the questions with regard to who plays offensive line, but there's a bigger question that looms. And that's who takes over as the unquestioned leader of this Philadelphia Eagles football team. Because in addition to Jason Kelce, it was also reported over the weekend from Jeremy Fowler of ESPN that Fletcher Cox may be calling it a career this offseason. Something that when Jordan Davis was questioned at his locker when the season ended, sounded like Jordan Davis thought the same thing. So now you are losing 2 of the longest tenured Eagles in franchise history. The top 3 Philadelphia Eagles in franchise history in terms of games played: Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham. Kelce got here in 2011. Fletcher Cox got here in 2012. A little bit different. Kelce was a 6th-round draft pick. Fletcher Cox was a 1st-round draft pick. 6-time Pro Bowler. Super Bowl winner. And in 2023, just like Kelce was playing well, Fletcher Cox was playing pretty well. Fletcher Cox, even though he missed a couple of games, still played over 60% of the defensive snaps. But just like I went through the offensive line, that the offensive line will probably be okay on the field, even though there's going to be a huge step back from Kelce. I still think they have the players that the offensive line should be okay. We also have the D tackles in place that should be able to make up for the loss of a Fletcher Cox. Jalen Carter in year 2. Jordan Davis going into year 3. Milton Williams is a D tackle I'm really excited about that we've seen pretty much get better every single season. You still have Marlon Tupelotu. So I think they'll be okay on the field, but the question's now, who's going to be your leaders on this football team? Now, Brandon Graham has said he wants to come back, but there's no guarantee that the Eagles are going to bring him back. I think they will. But there's going to be a changing of the guard as far as the leadership on this football team. So we heard a lot of stories since the season ended, even in the middle of the season, about how the Philadelphia Eagles want Jalen Hurts to be a better leader. Well, it's more important now than it's ever been. Because when you lose a Jason Kelce and you lose a Fletcher Cox, somebody else has to step up to be the unquestioned leader of this football team. And you look at the offense, I think Jalen Hurts is capable of being a better leader. I think A.J. Brown is a really good leader. I don't buy into the A.J. Brown is a diva talk. I think that narrative is so overblown, it's ridiculous. I had Joe Santoliquito on my 97.5 The Fanatic show on Saturday, who wrote a really good article for Bleeding Green Nation when the season ended, talking about how A.J. Brown is anything but a diva, how A.J. Brown is one of the vocal leaders in that locker room, who's respected in that locker room, that Jalen Hurts defers a lot to A.J. Brown when it comes to leadership. So I'm not buying that crap that A.J. Brown is a diva. So I think the offense will be fine when you have A.J. Brown and you have Devontae Smith, who's also a very good leader. You still have Lane Johnson and Jalen Hurts on the offensive side of the football. But who are your leaders on defense? If you lose Fletch, even if BG comes back, Brandon Graham's only playing about 20% of the snaps, 25% of the snaps. So who's going to be your dog? Who's going to be your Malcolm Jenkins? Because when Kelce gave his speech today, he made sure to reference Malcolm Jenkins. When Carson Wentz tore his ACL in 2017, who was it that rounded the troops? Who was it who got everybody together and gave the speech? We all we got, we all we need. Malcolm Jenkins. And if you follow JAKIB Sports on Twitter, they put up a question last week. Who's the most underrated Eagle in the last 25 years? And I answered it. Malcolm Jenkins. I don't think people appreciate Malcolm as much as they should in this town. I know he wasn't here as long as a Jason Kelce. I know he never reached the Brian Dawkins status. But Malcolm Jenkins was one of the best leaders on and off the field we've ever had in Philadelphia. So who's going to step up on the defensive side of the football and become that leader? You still have Darius Slay, but Slay leads a little bit differently. Slay likes to talk on social media. Slay likes to joke around a little bit. I know he's liked down at the NovaCare complex. But who's going to be your leader? Jalen Carter's a dog, but he's going to be in year 2. Jordan Davis? Milton Williams? Is Hassan Reddick coming back? Sidney Brown, we heard, had those leadership qualities, he may not even be ready to play when the season starts. So I think your leader on that defensive side of the football may not even be on the roster yet. And I don't know how good I feel about that it may be a guy that just comes in for the first time. But for me, that's one of the big question marks I have right now. Not who's going to play center, not who's going to replace Fletcher Cox at defensive tackle, but who's going to be that leader on the defensive side of the football. And when John McMullen joins the show, we'll talk to him about that as well. But not an easy day. And free agency, like I said, less than a week away when the legal tampering period starts. And another report from Jeremy Fowler over the weekend, in addition to saying Fletcher Cox may be done, is that not to rule out a reunion between the Philadelphia Eagles and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Everybody remembers CJGJ in the Super Bowl run of 2022. A lot of people wanted him back, but he went and signed a one-year deal in Detroit. Tore his pec, only played a couple of games. And I'd be okay with them bringing back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, but that can't be the only move they make at safety. Not when the only safety's on your roster right now, after you cut Kevin Byard, which, again, was a move we expected. But even if you bring back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the only other safeties on your roster are Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown. We don't know if Sidney Brown's going to be healthy to start the season, tore his ACL in Week 18. Reed Blankenship's been up and down. I still think he can be a good safety in this league, but he's also shown that he's a little injury prone. So I need to see the Eagles go out and make a big splash in free agency. I want Antoine Winfield Jr. Now, I'm just waiting any minute to see that he got franchise tagged, because Tampa Bay would be idiots to let him out the door. But if Antoine Winfield Jr. is available, give him whatever the hell he wants. Get him in the door, because that guy's a dog. And not only is he great in pass coverage, he can stop the run. He's one of the best blitzing safeties in the NFL. I want Antoine Winfield. And if he's not available, go get one of the other ones. Get Kyle Duggar from New England. Get Xavier McKinney from New York. Get Cameron Curl from Washington. I need to see them make a splash. And I see some people in the chat saying draft a young safety. Sure, draft a young safety, but that can't be the answer. We can't go into this season with even a first-round draft pick and put all of our hopes at safety on that person. It cannot be a question mark going into the season. They need to get a stud, proven linebacker in free agency. They need a stud, proven safety in free agency. We need guys who are ready to play week one, game one. There's no guarantee with draft picks. I don't care how good they were in college. There's no guarantee that the game will translate at the NFL level. So when we get back from the break, we'll bring on John McMullen. Like I said, he was down at the NovaCare complex today for the press conference with Jason Kelce. I'm sure John shed a couple tears today, but we'll get his take on everything that's going on with Kelce, what the plan's going to be for the future of this Philadelphia Eagles team, losing their veteran, losing their center, and we'll talk to him about some of the other Philadelphia Eagles needs. So hit that like button, hit that share button for me. When we get back, we'll be joined by our Eagles insider, John McMullen. Stay tuned.
Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
Philadelphia fans, we're cut from a different cloth. Born into a brotherhood and bonded to our team for life. We believe anything is possible because we've witnessed the impossible. While we may be from different neighborhoods, come Sunday, we are one, and we will be heard. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
Underdog Fantasy is the easiest place to play fantasy sports, and certainly the easiest when you're watching the NBA. And the NBA playoffs are almost here, and you can win money making picks. What are you waiting for? Sign up on UnderdogFantasy.com and use the promo code WIN. An Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. That's UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN. Get ready for the NBA and get ready for the NBA playoffs. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. Use the promo code WIN.
Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.
EAGLES, Eagles.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the Legal Hands to the Face show. On this emotional Monday night, after an all-time Philadelphia Eagles great, a Philly sports legend, Jason Kelce, officially announces his retirement. And now I want to bring in our Eagles insider, my man, John McMullen. What's going on, John?
Hey, Bill, how are you? Good to be here.
I don't think we've spoken since that wild card game, that disaster.
Oh, that was a bad game, huh? Yeah. Yeah, people are trying to put that one in the rearview mirror. Jason Kelce as well finally calls it a career after 13 seasons. So all of that sort of talk, after the game, he sort of told some teammates he was going to retire, and that got out. And there was the hand back and forth about maybe he'll change his mind. He has changed his mind in the past, but it was pretty clear this time. It's just a matter of when, not if. And today was when. Sad to see him go, but Eagles, I think, are prepared, and they've been preparing for this for years. You can't replace players like this, but at least they have a plan in place, and Cam Jurgens will move over and take over in center, and we'll see how it works out.
And you were down there today at the NovaCare?
Yeah.
How was it? How was it being in that room, man? Because it was tough watching it on TV. I can only imagine being down there.
I mean, yeah, very emotional. Obviously, Travis was there. Travis Kelce, Jason. We put the over under on tears. Jason's a very emotional guy, so he's been a crier in the past. So I put it at 2 minutes. He didn't get 2 seconds in, so I got that wrong way off the bat. So. Yeah, a lot of emotions, and he had Travis breaking down, and he had said this for a number of years that he wanted to do it the right way, and he wanted to make sure he was able to thank everybody who had been a part of his career, and he got most of them today. So it's fun to see when you get to cover a guy like Jason Kelce and have all the success and leave at the top of his sort of career, because even though he's 36, the most interesting part to me, I know people get caught up in the emotion, but I got back here. I was covering another team in a different city, and I got back here in 2016, which was the exact year where people were thinking maybe Jason Kelce would get cut. And people kind of forget that. And I remember the first time I met the guy, he was walking up the stairs at the NovaCare complex and sitting with a couple of reporters, and he was just working out in the off season. And he said, "I'm still here for now." He thought he was going to go. And he mentioned that with Jeff Stoutland today. So it was that season, 2016, where a lot of people were trying to run Jason Kelce out of town, and he mentioned that one guy in that building wanted him, and that was Jeff Stoutland, and that's when it all turned around. Ever since then, basically 6 all pro nods over that 7-season span, which is pretty phenomenal. You normally, we talk about the other player who might retire this offseason, likely to retire, Fletcher Cox. That's a typical career. Fletcher was a very dominant player early in his career. And then he's still a good player. He had a great year last year. Not a lot of defenders had good years, but Fletcher did. But he's not at the top of his game. Jason somehow got better in his 30s, which is very, very, very rare. So it was an interesting career.
Yeah, and it's evidence sometimes that you can't give up on guys. We saw the same thing with another long-tenured Philadelphia Eagle, Brandon Graham. There were a lot of people ready to give up on him early in his career, and look what happened. So, I keep thinking about Nolan Smith. I know there's a lot of people, Nolan Smith had a terrible rookie season. Well, it was a rookie season. You can't give up on guys that early in their career.
Yeah, you would think you'd learn from Brandon. I mean, Brandon thought he was going to get cut for Travis Long. If anybody remembers Travis Long, Chip Kelly really, really liked Travis, who tore his ACL. If he didn't tear his ACL, Brandon Graham probably would have been cut. And it's sort of that butterfly effect. Okay, they needed somebody. And then even the next year, when Brandon played pretty well, he still wanted to get Travis Long back in the mix, and he tore his ACL again. And all of a sudden, Brandon Graham takes off and becomes the player that he became. But yeah, there was that narrative for years that Eagles should have taken Earl Thomas, Eagles should have taken Jason Pierre-Paul, who are both great players. And Earl will probably be in the Hall of Fame. He was that good. But I find it ironic that Brandon actually surpassed them. He actually stayed in Philadelphia, obviously longer than Earl Thomas did in Seattle, and JPP, obviously, with the Giants. Amazing how that worked out.
And Jason got into a lot today. You mentioned he thought he was going to be cut in the 2016 season when you got here. He also talked about, which surprised me, was Garrett Reed's overdose at training camp that year, which shows it must have really had an impact on the players on this team that were there when that happened.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and I wasn't here at the time, and that was, I remember covering the league from afar, and I thought that was going to be one of the biggest NFL stories ever, and it kind of went away quickly. I always wonder what happened, to be honest, from a reporting standpoint. I think about that in a cynical way. I think, boy, the Eagles don't want to bring that up because that was and we all know the stuff that was in Garrett's room and all that kind of stuff. And the NFL, I think, did a good job from their perspective, kind of wiping that away. But from the Eagles players' perspective, it was obviously a very emotional time, brought them together, and obviously the Reed family, and everybody has so much respect for Andy. And he mentioned about how that, he's never been closer to a group of guys and what that meant going through that together. That was an ugly scene. So he was going through some of the moments. Most of them were good. Nick Foles had a great line about Nick that I won't say, but
and I was watching it on TV and they bleeped it. They kind of like reversed what he was saying. So it was all black. So I'm like, crap, I had to go online to hear what he said. And it was classic.
Yeah, the classic BDE for people that know what that is. But And Nick's, some people know his nickname, some people don't, but it's,
It's also
you-
funny that that's his nickname because he's like the most religious guy, Nick
yeah,
Foles. Everybody
yeah.
in town calls him BDN.
Yeah, well, it is what it is for, and people have seen it, so
Yeah.
it's not an old wives' tale. But he mentioned the snow game against Detroit and all that kind of stuff, and obviously even the Rams game where Carson Wentz tore his ACL, and
Yep.
That was amazing because I remember being at the NovaCare complex after they came back, and there was sort of a wake type feel in that thought the season was over for a short period, started feeling, woe was me. And all of a sudden the guys, Malcolm Jenkins, he mentioned, addressed the team. And all of a sudden they use it as fuel, and they go and have that run. A great line about Brandon Graham. He stopped Tom Brady once, only once, literally once, I think is what he said, because they gave up whatever 505 passing yards. Yeah, I mean, what a career! Tremendous. Again, 6 out of 7. He ends 6 out of 7 seasons with All Pro honors. It's kind of amazing, and we all know what Travis has become and the fact that he was there, and even Kylie, his wife, was there. Is his Everybody knows his mom. A lot of people know his dad because the Kelce's have become such stars, and they were all there. Um, I counted there were 29 reserve seats for
Wow.
people to sit, and typically, so this type of player retiring doesn't always happen. Um, so, you don't see it very often, and you could you could definitely still play, but the durability he's shown is maybe the most amazing aspect of his career. And, I do think a lot of people don't realize how much pain he's in on a week to week basis, even though he fights through it. And, you get to a certain age and you start wondering, you want to play. In his case, he wants to play with his 3 daughters and be able to have a quality of life. And he's always said, he got that advice from both Howard Mudd and Jeff Stoutland before Howard passed away. And he knows, and it's time to walk away.
And you mentioned Kelce talked about Malcolm Jenkins, who was a phenomenal leader on that Super Bowl team. Well, now Kelce retires. Reports are that another great leader on this team, Fletcher Cox, is probably going to retire. Who do you see stepping up, especially on the defensive side of the football, as the true leader of this team in 2024?
Well, I think there's going to be so many changes on the defensive side of the football. But some of these young guys, and Fletcher Cox, that was sort of maybe going to be his last sort of gift to this team. He's been trying to preach to Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter that, they're going to have to take over this defense and become leaders. We'll see if Nakobe Dean is the potential middle linebacker, but they're going to bring a lot of people in. Obviously, Slay is the captain. He'll be here this year, so he'll be a big part of the leadership aspect. But yeah, I mean, it's to be determined, and obviously BG is still going to be here, but there's only so much you can do at that stage of your career when people know this is going to be Brandon Graham's last year. He's already said it numerous times. He wants to get to 15. This will be 15. Only plays, 25, 30% of the snaps. So some of these young guys are going to have to take it, seize that mantle and become leaders. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Very few teams have that core 4 that the Eagles had. And Nick Sirianni talks about it all the time. When you're a first-time head coach, you usually don't have veterans like Jason Kelce, Fletcher Cox, Lane Johnson, Brandon Graham. I mean, it just doesn't happen with the modern NFL. There's so much turnover. So Now the Eagles will be more like everybody else, and it's been a luxury to have these 4 guys together for so long, and you knew it was gonna end at some point.
Yeah, I know. I thought this was coming. I expected it to come, but it didn't make it any easier today. Watching Jason Kelce breaking down emotionally, saying his goodbyes. But now I know you've probably talked about this on your show, Birds 365, but you and I haven't had a chance to talk about it. What do you see as the biggest needs? You talked about a lot of new players probably coming in on defense. What do you see as the biggest needs on the defensive side of the football?
Boy, they need everything, except maybe for defensive tackle, which is one of the reasons why Fletcher's probably going to retire. He saw the writing on the wall. Anytime and people think about the last 2 years when they took Jordan Davis at 13, Jalen Carter at 9, but you can go back even a year further when you take Milton Williams in the 3rd round. When you use that much premium draft capital on one position, you want to get those guys up to speed. Those are the guys you're going to lean on, and that'll be the case. So other than that, they need everything. And maybe it gets a little bit more dire at edge rusher, depending what happens with Hassan Reddick, which can go either direction. Obviously, if they move them, then they're definitely going to need an edge rusher. We know they need a corner. You could argue they need multiple linebackers, and they certainly need at least one safety. So basically, I mean, everything.
Yeah.
Everything except defensive tackle, I would say, is a need on the defensive side of the ball. And that shouldn't be a surprise because they were bad on defense last year. There's no other way. There's no way to frame it other than they were a bad defensive football team.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't pass the eye test, but you could also look at the stats, and they ended up in the bottom of almost every single category. Now, looking at the cornerback position, though, because I've been saying on this show and on my other show, the Philly Sports Power Hour, that I look at linebacker, safety, edge rusher, and corner, and I actually put corner 4th on the list because I'm expecting Isaiah Rodgers, who they picked up from the Colts, to come in and pick up right where he left off, which was pretty good in 2022. And Keely Ringo, 21-year-old 4th-round rookie, started showing us some things at the end of last season. You have Zach McPherson coming back from his Achilles tear. So do you think those guys can make that leap in 2024 and be really good corners in this league?
Maybe one. And I would throw, and I know people don't want to hear this, but especially with Vic Fangio coming in, James Bradbury's under contract. Let's see what Big can do with him. He has a history of having a bad year, then having a good year and bouncing back. And I think people forget how the Eagles made a mistake by jerking him around, playing him in different positions, playing him in the slot. I still don't understand that. And maybe he can have that bounce back year. Now, it all depends on Vic Fangio's evaluation. If he's done, he's done. If they think he's lost a step, and the Eagles, remember, have all this access to GPS data now. They know what he's running. They know how bad it was compared to the year prior. So you could say, I mean, he just lost it, and that's a possibility because that happens in the NFL. But if Vic Fangio believes, look, he's a zone defensive coordinator. They're going to play a lot of zone, and that's James Bradbury's strength. So I wouldn't just close the book on him just yet. We'll see how it shakes out. I'm with you with Ringo. I liked what I saw. I think he's got a long-term potential to be a really good starting outside corner, but you can't count on him. You can't say, oh, we're going to cut Bradbury and Ringo's going to start, or we're Isaiah Rodgers. I mean, technically, we all think it's going to happen. It's probably going to happen, but there's no guarantee he's even going to be reinstated. So, I mean, first things first, he's got to be reinstated. Then he's had a year off from football. I would say to lean on that because he had some nice, and he looked like an ascending player in Indianapolis. Deshaun Watson looked like a superstar quarterback, and he didn't play for a year plus, and he doesn't look like the same guy, period. Um, Even at a young age, that could have a very bad effect on a player. So, same thing. I don't think you can count on him. Can't count on Eli Ricks. So they have to bring in, if they're not going to move forward with James Bradbury, they have to bring in some kind of veteran presence. And Rodgers, I think, is better suited to move inside. Now, he played outside
Yeah, he
in
hasn't played much.
Indianapolis.
He didn't play much in the slot at all.
No, but that's because the Colts have Kenny Moore,
Yeah.
who is top 2 or 3 slot cornerback in football. But if you just look at the Eagles and, another name, Isaiah Avonte Maddox, has been in the past one of the best nickel corners as well. He has been injury prone. So that's a difficult decision, and he's expensive. And where are the Eagles going to go with him? But if they need a nickel corner and they're going to move on, Rodgers is 5'10" and 172. So I think people look, and I've seen it, people look way too much at not understanding. All right, yeah, he played outside in Indianapolis, but he played outside because they have one of the best slot corners in football. So if they didn't have Kenny Moore, they would have played him inside. So it doesn't really matter where they played him because they were in a different position with a really big time player. 5'10", 172. You want him on the outside?
Yeah, he looks like he'd be a slot corner.
Yeah. And I think that's where the Eagles project him. And we'll see. But it's nice to have versatility. And remember, they have young outside corners with some potential with Ringo and Ricks, who are, 6'2", legitimate outside corners. So I would be stunned if they don't move him inside, or at least try to play him inside if he's reinstated.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. One more for you before I let you out the door. I see people asking this in the chat. I don't know if you have the answer or not. When they re-signed Kelce last year, they kind of structured his deal in a way where if he wanted to retire, they could do some things. Do we know what the cap savings are going to be or what the cap hit's going to be now that he's retiring?
I don't have it in front of me, but I can pull it up real quick. Yeah, I mean, the Eagles set it up as they typically do, with a bunch of void years on the back end to make his contract better against the cap last year. So they're going to lose some cap space. They'll do it basically. We're talking about dead money, 8 million, 7 million, 5 million, 3 million, 600. So they're going to be paying for Jason for years, a little bit on the cap. And the cap, remember, is going to continually go up over that span. So, I mean, that's how they do business. And they put the void years on the back end to make the cap number more manageable. But no, they don't. It doesn't get wiped off the books. They agreed to pay this money, and they spread it out over that 5 years to make it better against the cap. So it's all that money from last year, but they spread it out over 5 years. So it's not crippling, but they're going to have some dead money, and the Eagles knew that, and they understand that. So they prepared for it.
Nice. Well, exciting, though. Legal tampering period starts in less than a week, which is amazing. We're there already, man. NFL 365 days a year now. That's why you have Birds 365. See, now I'm getting it. Now I'm understanding.
There you go. 365.
John, I appreciate you making time, my brother. You have a good one.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Good talking to you.
John McMullen joining the show, our Eagles insider here at JAKIB Sports. Also does a great job writing for SI.com. So make sure you check out John McMullen on Twitter. You can read some of his articles. Does a really good job covering the Philadelphia Eagles. But an emotional day in Philadelphia, and we always end the Legal Hands to the Face show with a little Philadelphia Eagles trivia. So this one, I'm going to give you the answer because it's Jason Kelce Day. But then I'm going to ask you a question that maybe you don't have the answer to. But who has started the most consecutive games in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history? Most consecutive starts, and that belongs to our man, Jason Kelce, who started 156 straight games for the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, here's the part maybe you don't know. Who's number 2? Who's number 3? Who's number 4? And who's number 5 in franchise history? Can you round out the top 5 in Philadelphia Eagles franchise history for the most consecutive starts in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform? We know Jason Kelce is number 1, but do you know 2 through 5 in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform as the most consecutive starts? Remember, it's not consecutive games played, it starts. So Jay Koch in the chat says the magician. Well, John Dornbos wouldn't start games because he's the long snapper. Twiz says John Runyon. That is number 2 with 144 consecutive starts. Does anybody know who 3, 4, and 5 are? You're probably not going to get this one. But number 3, Herm Edwards with 135 consecutive starts. Number 4, Jerry Sizemore with 127 consecutive starts. And then number 5, Reggie White, 120 consecutive starts in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform. That's the top 5. But how about the NFL? I looked, I'm thinking, man, Jason Kelce, 156 consecutive starts. That's got to be a record at the center position, at least. Not even close. Not even close. There's a center who has almost 90 more consecutive starts than Jason Kelce had, which is remarkable. From 1962 to 1978, for the Minnesota Vikings, Mick Tingelhoff, that's a pretty good name, Mick Tingelhoff had 240 consecutive starts at the center position. And that's also not the overall NFL record. Who in the chat can get this one? Probably a quick Google search will give you this answer. But who has the most consecutive starts in NFL history? And I'll give you a hint. It's a quarterback. It was a quarterback who has the most consecutive starts in NFL history. We know Jason Kelce had the most in a Philadelphia Eagles uniform with 156. The NFL record belongs to a quarterback who had 297 consecutive starts. And Bobby Murphy and LJ nail it. Brett Favre. Brett Favre had 297 consecutive starts. Pretty impressive. Whether you like Favre or not, that is a very impressive stat. But that's going to do it for the Legal Hands to the Face show tonight. Again, if you're listening to the audio on the podcast and you made it through the full hour, it means you like what you hear. So please give me a review on any podcast platform you're listening to. It really helps us reach more Philadelphia Eagles fans. If you're here on YouTube, make sure you like and subscribe to both JAKIB Sports and to my YouTube channel, Bill Colarulo, Philly Sports Talk. We're posting daily content to our shorts on that page that you don't get on JAKIB Sports. And also make sure you're following on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook as well. And again, reminder for those who don't watch the Philly Sports Power Hour, I'm live every Monday through Friday, 10 a.m., also on all our YouTube channels. And every Saturday and Sunday morning on 97.5 The Fanatic, you can catch me 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. talking all things Philly sports. I appreciate everybody spending this hour with me. Jason Kelce, we love you. We will miss you. You are one of the greatest to ever do it in this town, and you will be a legend here forever. As always, go Birds.
Go for the pulls and the pools. Go for the oohs and the ahs. Go for the bubbles and the bubbly. Go for the story and the stories. Go for the win. Go to Ocean Casino Resort. Book your trip at theoceanac.com.